Let's imagine the following situation. You are a guy in your early 40s and the manager of a business. You basically have a car, an apartment, and an unstable life that directly depends on your job as a manager. You are not proud of much that you have done in life except for your job, which is the most important thing to you and takes up practically all of your time. Your time is what really keeps the business running. However, there are two obstacles in your way that directly threaten your job, consequently threatening your unstable life, and ultimately threatening the only pride you've had in life. And who are these obstacles? Mordecai and Rigby. Benson is a character I really didn't like when I was a kid, and I think most of you didn't either. Maybe because, in a way, he was the authority within the show, that guy who comes to spoil the fun and enjoyment of the protagonists. A very mean and overly irritated guy who liked to yell at others and boss them around because, after all, he was the boss, he was the authority, and he could do that. I found him very annoying and unbearable. To me, he didn't like to have fun and prevented others from having fun. The guy was the enemy of fun, and he never took risks in Mordecai and Rigby's adventures. When he somehow did participate, it was mostly because he was kind of forced to, right? Because he didn't want to go at all, and he was always living in fear, saying they should leave or shouldn't be there, and seeing the worst side of every situation all the time. He was basically a natural pessimist, and in my mind, he had those attitudes and acted that way because he was a bad, bitter, and cowardly guy. But in reality, he was just an ordinary guy, annoyed by the bad behavior of other people. But cowardly, he was a little bit indeed, there's no denying that, right? But we can say that Benson is basically the Squidward of regular show. When we are kids, we don't like him, we find him boring and unfunny because of what he represents in general. But when we grow up, well, we become just like him and understand perfectly how he feels. And that's actually a very natural thing. Humans mature, some sooner, others later, some more, and others less. But yes, people mature, and one of the consequences of that is seeing things in a completely different way than more immature people do, along with a greater sense of responsibility. This leads to different opinions, different views, different feelings, and can make you be seen as, guess what, an extremely boring and dull person. Now that I've grown up, it's easy to see things from Benson's perspective and see how much he suffered in the show most of the time. Benson would give Mordecai and Rigby a very simple task, and when he returned, everything was on fire, sometimes literally. It's also true to say that sometimes Mordecai and Rigby didn't directly cause these problems, and when they did, it was generally not with bad intentions, but out of stupidity or incompetence. The problem is that every time they were stupid or incompetent, it directly affected another person's life, which in this case was Benson, in a very negative way. And my friend, Benson's life wasn't affected just a few times. In the end, the blame always fell on him because, after all, he was the incompetent one for being a manager who couldn't get his employees to complete simple tasks. This caused him to be humiliated many times by the park owner and almost got him fired several times. And once he actually was fired. What I mean is that Benson had plenty of reasons to hate Mordecai and Rigby because, to him, they were the source of all his problems, or at least the main ones. They threatened his stable life, which was the only thing he had, on a daily basis. That's why he was so hard on them. But it's also fair to mention that all this anger he had also came from his upbringing. For example, in one episode, we learned that Benson grew up in a very troubled environment since he was a child. He was taught to shout to get someone's attention and act angrily to get what he wanted, which obviously caused him a lot of problems in the future. The frustrations he had in life and his completely wrong upbringing made him an extremely angry and explosive guy, which was often exaggerated. This anger that he had in abundance and expressed all the time was a kind of mask that hid the deep fear he felt, the fear of losing everything he cared about, everything he had in life. He kind of closed himself off in this shell to prevent that from happening, and we can see this quite clearly. It becomes evident that he is very afraid when, in episode 27 of season 3, he literally cries. He cries because Mordecai and Rigby were irresponsible, and now he ends up getting fired because of their irresponsibility. Man, that scene is really sad because you can clearly see how devastated he is by it, how much he cares, how much he was affected by that situation, and how, in the end, everything was going to be his fault, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. In the end, he wasn't responsible for that situation. Sure, he has his jerk moments. Sometimes he is a jerk, but who isn't? Like in that episode where he sells Mordecai and Rigby's Rock Band game, or when he says a bunch of mean things when Rigby is in a coma, and he even takes a punch from Mordecai. Sometimes he's kind of a jerk, but he recognizes that he's wrong and always seeks to redeem himself in the end because After all, he's not a bad person. He just does what he was taught to do, which is to get things through yelling and anger. It's really unfair, man, because if we stop to think about it, it's something that came from his upbringing and affected him as an adult. The situation around him also makes him very insecure and transforms that insecurity into anger. It's a lot deeper than it seems, if we delve into the character. What I mean is that he is not a bad person, definitely, and he doesn't deserve all the misfortune that happens to him in the show. Today, I can say that I understand him perfectly. To tell the truth, I even feel sorry for him. Well, if you've watched until now, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. I really hope we can see each other around here again, so goodbye.